And it's time for some more 1970 appreciations of the music of that year. This is my second video looking at West Coast music, and in this video I think I'm going to cover 3 albums if I'm lucky. So let's get on to the opener, and this will probably take up most of this video. I make no apologies for that. When I listened to this last week, first time in a number of years, I had a rush of good feeling about the whole of the album. Absolutely magnificent and neglected by myself. I'm talking about the band the Byrds. A very brief history of them. Formed in Los Angeles in 1964. They initially pioneered the notion of folk rock, and they melded the influence of the Beatles and other British bands in the so-called British invasion with traditional American folk music. That blend of clear harmony singing and Roger McGuinn's jangly 12-string Rickenbacker guitar became infamous, really, and became absorbed into the vocabulary of rock. And it still remains an influential factor in today's current music, with many bands adopting a similar style. The nucleus of this band at the start was Roger McGuinn, sometimes called Jim McGuinn, never quite worked that one out, Gene Clark and David Crosby. And all 3 of these basically came from folk music. Their debut album, Mr. Tambourine Man, came out in 1965 following a huge hit single with the title the same of that album. And a further 7 albums followed between 65 and 1970. 2 releases in both 68 and 69. And they also had a number of hit singles. I have actually reviewed the notorious Byrd Brothers, which came out in 1968, in full, and I'll leave a link to that if you're interested. Numerous lineup changes in those 6 years, however, and I'm now going to look at the album Untitled, which came into my possession in 1970. That was the day it was released, the year it was released, sorry. And it was, in fact, my first purchase of an album by the Byrds. Although one of my closest friends was completely nuts on the Byrds, and every time I went round to his house, he pulled out another Byrds album for me to listen to. Most of it washed over me, to be honest, although all those albums now are cherished gems. Untitled, then, a brief summary of who played on this album. Roger McGuinn, guitar, moog, synthesizer and vocals. Will be a slide, of course. Clarence White was on guitar, mandolin and also sang. Skip Batten, he sang as well. In fact, they all sang. Electric bass. Gene Parsons was on the drums, but he also chipped in with guitar and harmonica. And there's some very influential additional personnel on this, namely Graham Parsons, who was previously a member, and Byron Berlin on fiddle, and the infamous pedal steel guitar player Sneaky Pete Clino. So, to this album. It caught people a bit by surprise because it was a double album, but one album was a live album and the other the studio. And so you got the best of both worlds, really, because the live album, which I'll review shortly, was their first. And it was a first of its kind, really. And it's got 2 sides. The first side is a collection of songs, some of them written by Bob Dylan, and the second live side was taken up by 1 track, and that was 8 Miles High, which had been a huge hit, and I'll refer to it in a bit anyway. As for the studio album, there's a few tracks that immediately stick out. The two absolute jewels of Chestnut Mare and Just a Season, but that wasn't all at the story. Drugs Top Girl and a dizzying hippie chant on Come Back Home, which is a Skimp Batten song. I'm now going to go into a little bit more depth on this, and I make no apologies because I do feel that this album, this double album, is some of the best music of that era. So, to the track list, we'll start with the live album and the first side, Lover of the Bayou. Now, this was a song that had previously been put together by Roger McGuinn and a friend of his, Jacques Levy, for a project that they eventually sort of, well, they didn't abort it, but they didn't complete it. They were going to make a play based on the Henrik Ibsen's Peer Gynt, and this song was written for that, but it was shelved. The title of the play was going to be Gene Trip, and I'll refer to that on a couple of occasions in this review. The song, one of four written by the pair on this album, and it's got a crunching guitar, very heavy for the band, the Byrds really, but McGuinn's rock vocals are powerful. I love Batten's bass on it. The song is set during the American Civil War and was intended for a scene in which the eponymous hero of the musical is working as a smuggler, bootlegger and gun runner for both sides, Confederates and Unionists. So that's the first track. Up next is Positively 4th Street, a jingle jangle into Dylan's classic tune, and it's a great version, scorching version as well, as was the case with so many Dylan songs covered by the Byrds. White is a hell of a guitar player, and you hear it here as he shows off his country music skills. Next up is Nashville West, instrumental written by White. It's a fast country hoedown song with the twin guitars and that thudding Batten bass. Next up, a big hit for the Byrds, So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, and it segues in from Nashville West, and it sounds absolutely terrific. Followed by Mr. Tambourine, another one that they chose to put together, written by Dylan, of course, their first major hit, and it never sounded as good as it did on this live cut. And there's once again some belting, speedy guitar work by White. Then another hit, Mr. Spaceman, which I love, and that was the first side. But it's such a great side. You are tempted to put it back, the needle back on, and start again. The second side, in contrast, is this 16-minute jam on 8 Miles High. The actual song, 8 Miles High, doesn't really start until you get past the 13-minute mark. But there's some dramatic interplay between McGuinn and White on this, and the intricate bass and drums playing of Batten and Parsons is a highlight. If you like jams from rock bands, well, this is a good one. So I suggest you get your headphones on and listen to it. To the studio album, and it kicks off with Chestnut Mare, 5 minutes of idyllic pop music, really. It was also written for that Gene Trip project. Lilting bark-like middle section, wonderful song, never wanes the more you listen to it. McGuinn at his very, very best. A mix of singing and spoken word. The chorus with the mandolin is extraordinary, and I've listened to it probably more than 50 times. And when I heard it the other day, I had to listen to it a second time because it almost brought me to tears. So I'm now going to go through the lyric to this, and it's a lengthy one, but it's a tremendous love song, quite metaphoric really, about the love of a horse and wanting to own it or be with it. And here we go then. Always alone, never with a herd. Prettiest mare I've ever seen. You'll have to take my word. I'm going to catch that horse if I can, and when I do, I'll give you her my brand. Well, I was up on Stony Ridge after this Chestnut Mare. I've been chasing her for weeks. Oh, and I'd catch a glimpse of her every once in a while, taking her meal or bathing. A fine lady. This one day I happened to be real close to her, and I saw her standing over there, so I snuck up to her nice and easy, got my rope out, and I flung it in the air. I'm going to catch that horse if I can, and when I do, I'll give her my brand, and we'll be friends for life. She'll be just like a wife. I'm going to catch that horse if I can. Well, I got her, and I'm pulling on her, and she's pulling back like this mule going up a ladder, and I take a choice and I jump up on her, damned if I don't land right on top of her, and she shakes off, running up on the ridge higher than I've ever seen before. She's running along just fine till she till she stops, and something spooked her. It's a sign rider, all coiled and ready to strike. She didn't know what to do for a second, and then she jumps off the edge, me holding on above the hills. Higher than eagles were gliding, suspended in the sky over the moon. Straight for the sun we were riding. My eyes were filled with light. Behind us black walls, below us a bottomless canyon, floating with no sound. Gulls far below seemed to be suddenly rising, exploding all around. And hang on a minute, I've got lost. I'm going to catch that horse if I can, and when I do, I'll give her my brand, and we'll be friends for life. She'll be just like a wife. I'm going to catch that horse if I can. And we were falling down this crevice, about a mile down, I'd say. I look down and I see this red thing below us coming up real fast. And it's our reflection in a little pool of water, about 6 feet wide and 1 foot deep. And we're crawling down right through it. We hit and we splashed it dry. That's when I lost my hold and she got away. But I'm going to try to get her again. Someday I'm going to catch that horse if I can, and when I do, I'll give her my brand, and we'll be friends for life. She'll be just like a wife. I'm going to catch that horse if I can. Wow, I really enjoyed reading that. I hope you enjoyed listening to it, and do read it on the slide. It's absolutely wonderful. Second track is another great song, Truck Stop Girl. This is written by Little Feat's Lowell George and Bill Payne, and it was on their debut album, another album that's linked in this description that I've done a review for. And here it's sung by White, and it's a great country blues. He's a great singer, and the song does justice to the original. All the Things is next. This is another from that McGuinn Levy project. Glides in smooth as silk. McGuinn's bleeding vocals, and he was a truly wonderful vocalist, I think. The piano guitar are married together, and Graham Parsons chips in on backing vocals, and it leads to a frantic finish. The next track I absolutely love. It's gorgeous. It's called Yesterday's Train, and it features Sneaky Pete on pedal steel guitar, which is interlinked with some gorgeous harmonica by Gene Parsons. It's exquisite. The white guitar colours the outro, and it's a general meditation on the theme of reincarnation. That's what I thought about the lyric. Next up is Hungry Planet. Completely different style of song. We start off with some very, very chunky, funky style rhythm. Chopping acoustic guitar chords, intricately played, written by Batten and one Kim Fowley. There's a modulator synthesizer played by McGuinn on this, and there's some strange earthquake sounds as part of the effects, and it's certainly got a psychedelic feel to it. So to the other gem, Just a Season, just under 4 minutes. The melody is insatious. McGuinn's vocals are dreamy, warm and inspirational. The lyrics are about stardom, and stardom for that very brief moment of time. But I'm not going to read those ones for you because the video's getting too long. Then we've got Take a Whiff. It's written by Leadbelly, arranged by the Byrds, of course. There's drug references to this, to cocaine use, and there's a very tricky mandolin by White to a brash sort of vocal. I think it was Parsons singing this, but I'm not altogether sure. You All Look Alike is another Batten Kim Fowley collaboration. McGuinn on lead vocals here, and Byron Berlin comes in on some pretty audacious fiddle playing, which gives it a real country hobo feeling. And then to the final track, written by Skip Batten, Welcome Back Home. That's W-E-L-L-C-O-M-E, not one word. There was quite a discussion about which spelling the song was supposed to represent, but this is the correct one as far as I'm aware, because it reflected the coming home of the American soldiers from Vietnam, and welcome was hardly what it was. It's a great closer. It's ham-themic, it's hippie laden, it's sang by Batten, it's got a heartfelt comment about the war in Vietnam. The guitar work reminds me of the end of the Doors' first album in places, called The End. Batten's chanting towards the end is a Nichiren Buddhist mantra, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I don't think my pronunciation's too good on that, but that signifies the end of what is a tremendous piece of work. I think I'm stumped. If you've never heard this album, the two albums really, then get to listen to it immediately. An offering on this West Coast 1970 episode 2 is a band called Poco. Now I have to confess, I don't know a lot about Poco. I have a number of their albums, but I really didn't give any justice to them. And for this video, I decided to listen for the very first time, yeah, what a confession, the very first time, the second album by Poco, just called Self-Titled Poco. This band was formed in 1968 by Jim Messina and Richie Fury after the band Buffalo Springfield folded. They were in that band, of course, with Neil Young and Stephen Stills. So one could speculate that Poco were going to be a pretty talented group. Tim Smith had replaced Randy Messner on bass for the second album. Another two famous musicians from that part of the world who both have been in the band The Eagles. Messner moved on to The Eagles after he left Poco, and Smith amazingly replaced Messner again a few years down the road when Messner called it a day. Not surprisingly, the band were a blend of country with rock. Some of the fans called them a country rock band, and others called them a rock with country influences. And as I say, 3 of the members of Poco have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, They are Fury from Buffalo Springfield, and Mesner and Smith with the Eagles. So quite a pedigree. Now I'm going to go through the tracks. Opens up with Hurry Up, very, very prominent with his organ-driven funky country sound. But there's also bits of cutting guitar from Messina, and I developed a real love for Jim Messina when he teamed up after he left Poco to play music with Kenny Loggins in Loggins and Messina. But I'm sidetracked. You Better Think Twice is track 2. It's a great hoedown country rocker with impressive bridge work by Messina again. Honky Tonk Downstairs, you can hear the first hint of those Eagles harmonies on this, and great steel work by Rusty Young on pedal steel guitar. But it's got a barroom feel to it for sure. Keep On Believing, it has a rocky intro, and again the dual guitars of Messina and Young, yes, traditional guitar with pedal steel, grab out at you, and lovely group vocals, of course, as usual. Anyway, Bye Bye is a 7-minute opus. It's a country blues and really gets jam-like, and it's coupled with some really flashing keyboards that are locked in with Messina's guitar breaks. It's a great track. Organ sound courtesy of Young's pedal steel guitar. There was no organ on in the studio. Amazing, how did he do it? And then Don't Let It Pass By, a very slow country ballad. It really was so impressive listening to this album. I realised how hugely underrated they were. Very competent delivery and some rich harmonies. Absolutely first class. Over for side 2, and just one track on this. It's got 2 songs segued together, Nobody's Fool and the Latino El Tonto de Nadie Regresa, whatever that means. It's 18 minutes, it's got a blues theme, and the first part has a sort of country, a Crosby, Stills and Nash feel poking its head through, before the organ sound from Young's pedal steel starts the jam. It's really funky, reminiscent of Messina's later work with Loggins. It stirs the foot for sure. The percussion solo briefly in the middle links into the Latino flair. And then we have an Allman-style takeover with rousing blues guitar at a pace that swinches backwards and forwards to samba rhythms, and again that very original pedal steel organ sound. It becomes rather frantic towards the end, but by the time you reach the outro, you're sort of exhausted because it's so polished and very listenable. So after all that, I was worn out, but what an incredible album. And sadly, I am guilty of having neglected it for 51 years. Confession time, to be sure. So anyway, that's the second album, and I think that's going to do it on this. The third offering will have to wait for another day. Hope you enjoyed it.